Good morning and welcome. My name is Gary Cazalet and welcome to the 10th Melbourne Law Apps Awards competition. As I said, my name is Gary Cazalet. You'll see it on the screen, and I had the pleasure of teaching the students you'll hear from today. I'd like to start by acknowledging that I am on the country of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and Aboriginal elders of other communities and First Nation members that may be watching today. I'd like to welcome the judges, the students, representatives of other organisations, colleagues, friends and family members and people watching from around the globe today. This morning, students will compete for the honour of winning the Herbert Freehills Award for the Best Law App. The award will be decided by a panel of judges who I'll introduce in a moment. At the conclusion of the presentations, we'll also have an audience award, and that'll be able to be voted on by you, the people watching today. You'll be told how to do that, and there'll be a little voting button at the bottom of the screen. And that will occur when the judges go off to the virtual room to deliberate on their decision. Just a couple of housekeeping things that I'd just like to mention to start with. Could you turn off your video and microphone, please? So everybody's on mute and no video, because if your microphone is on and there's a presentation, it's going to interrupt the presentations. This presentation is going to be recorded and it will be available via the MLS website later on, and people that can't watch it this morning can watch it later. Just as a little bit of background, and I expect that quite a lot of people watching this will already know this, but in Law Apps, students work in teams and they seek to understand community needs through user testing and building applications that will serve an unmet need for the community or sections of the community. An important part of what they're doing in this subject is learning human-centered design. It's a central part of the subject, and students work, I think you'll see, very hard to implement it as part of their building and design package. This semester, students have come up with a range of proposals. They pitched them to me, set out why they thought that they were great proposals, and that's the work that they've been doing this semester. I'd like to, before we start, thank a few people and organisations. The first organisation I'd like to thank is Herbert Freehills for their support, and in particular Alan Peckham, who's one of the judges today. Their support over a number of years now has enabled this subject to be expanded from something which we started with, I think, 10 or 15 students years ago to now 60 students taught twice per year. It's enabled me to do further learning, employ 2 teaching assistants as well, and to offer this subject as many times as we can per year. I'm very grateful for Herbert Freehills and Alan Peckham. Neota Logic has supplied one of the software platforms, and it is the software platform that all of the apps that you'll see today were built on. They supplied people on the ground, and in particular, Kevin Mulcahy in New York from Neota Logic. Thank you, Kevin. I think you might be watching from New York now. And John Lord, the chairman of Neota, who is also one of the judges. This semester, we've also used the software platform Josef, which is a platform that was designed and created by 2 MLS alumni, Tom Dreyfus and Sam Flynn. Thank you, Tom and Sam, for that. I'd also like to thank JD and Christine, my teaching assistants. They've provided extraordinary support to me and the students over the semester. And of course, the final thanks, and the most important thanks, is to the students themselves. To say it's been hard in Melbourne over the last 2 years is really an understatement. We have the distinction of being the most locked down city in the world, and all but one of the students, I think, in this subject this semester are, all but 2 are in Melbourne for this subject. They've had to push themselves beyond the usual requirements of a traditional law subject, but also push themselves to meet each other virtually, work together virtually, and create the extraordinary things that you'll see today. So thank you very much. And particularly, I'd like to acknowledge those students for whom it is their last class for their law degree. Well done and congratulations. So first of all, now I'd like to introduce the judges before we start the presentations. We have Alan Peckham, who I've already mentioned. He's the Chief Administrative Officer for Herbert Freehills. He's a regular speaker in our classes and has been, as I said, a keen supporter over many years. We have John Lord, who I've also mentioned. He's the Chairman of Neota Logic, also a keen supporter, and has provided me and the students enormous support over many, many years for this subject. And finally, Kate Fisher-Doherty, representing the law school. She's the director of the Melbourne Law School clinics. Thank you, the three of you, for agreeing to judge today. Each team will have a maximum of 8 minutes to present, followed by 4 minutes of questions. So we are about to move on to the presentations. I'm going to interrupt the students if they stray a little bit too far over the 8 minutes allotted to them. So now I would like to ask the students who are in spent convictions to turn on their video, turn on their mics. I'll turn off mine, and we look forward to your presentation.
Good morning. My name is Kaya, and I am joined by Cavan, Virginia, and Gidon. Today, we are pleased to present the SCV app, an MLS law apps initiative to help break cycles of crime. During her time working at a police check provider, my fellow group member, Virginia, found that people were struggling with removing old convictions from their police check record, which was having serious impact on their chances of employment. The Australian Human Rights Commission have found that complaints of discrimination in employment on the basis of criminal record is disproportionately higher than other forms of employment discrimination. Numerous studies have pointed to the relationship between recidivism and unemployment, a significant contributing factor in the cycle of crime. The Spent Convictions Act 2021 Victoria, an act which sets up a scheme for convictions to be spent, that is, removed from a person's criminal record, was enacted on the 30th of March 2021. Well, that's pretty fresh legislation, we would say, more recent than COVID-19 hitting, the High Court decision in Love and Toms, or Meghan and Harry appearing on Oprah. Because the legislation is so new, there is a great need for an app like ours to assist people in taking advantage of the spent convictions legislation, to learn about spent convictions, including their rights in the context of employment, to find out the status of their convictions, and to apply to the Magistrates Court for a spent conviction order where necessary. Users can create an account if they wish, and at the end of the session, an individualized report is produced. We have discovered that no organisation provides proper guidance in relation to the new spent conviction legislation, including the Department of Justice and Community Safety or Victoria Legal Aid. We believe that these organisations, as well as police check providers and employment platforms, might be interested in SCV. Elements of the Act are already in force, with the remainder coming into effect by July next year. We are excited by the prospect of possibly receiving funding by that time and improving our app. I will now hand over to Cavan to begin taking us through the app.
So when users open SCV, they will be encouraged to learn about spent convictions. Since users have different levels of existing knowledge, we have formatted the education modules in expandables here to allow users to choose which specific questions they want answered. For example, here, the difference between a serious and non-serious conviction. We've also created a video accompanied by a transcript, which is embedded in this expandable, to provide an alternative learning opportunity for audio-visual learners to understand their rights.
Will a spent conviction remain on my criminal record? No, a spent conviction does not form part of your criminal record.
And through our interview process, we learned that some users want to know exactly what they have to prepare before proceeding through the application. So we've included this list here. At the end of the education module, users can decide how to proceed. If users already know that they have a serious conviction, they can apply for it to be spent. Alternatively, users can find out the status of their conviction, or if they only wanted general information at this stage, they can exit the app. Based on feedback from a criminal lawyer and sergeant, we have kept legal jargon to a minimum, but where unavoidable, we have included these hover definitions to assist with comprehensibility, especially for those who skip the early part of the education module. We've also included here a Google Translate feature to increase accessibility. I now hand over to Virginia to take us through the question flow for users who do not know the status of their convictions.
Here, we ask questions to determine if the user's convictions are ones that can be spent automatically, spent upon application, or if they're so serious that they will never be spent. User testing showed that when it comes to convictions, users don't want to input sensitive data unless necessary. So instead of asking about the specific nature of the conviction, we provided enough information so that users can make these assessments themselves. Convictions that are non-serious are generally spent automatically after 5 or 10 years, but special rules may apply. We let users choose whether they are comfortable with sharing the month and year of their conviction. If they aren't comfortable, they'll be asked more categorical questions about each conviction. But if they are, they can check for the status of all convictions at once with this concise form. So let's say the user inputs 2 convictions. Then on the next page, a table appears outlining whether their convictions have been automatically spent or will be spent in the future, along with a reminder of their rights. Now let's go back to this screen and proceed as a user with a serious conviction who needs to apply to have their conviction spent. This initial screen checks if the user is eligible to apply. Based on feedback that some users may not have all their personal information handy, we have the option for the applicant to create an account so that their application details can be saved for next time. But if the users don't want to save sensitive information, they can just skip this page. I will now hand over to Gidon to take us through what a user will do if they wish to apply for a spent conviction order from a magistrate's court.
So, say our user, completely randomly named Gary, has created an account. He can sign in here and the application page will appear with details from the last session. Besides the person's name and conviction, an application to the Magistrate's Court for a spent conviction order to remove serious convictions from a criminal record needs to include any evidence of demonstrable rehabilitation since the time of the relevant offence. As everyone's experience is different, we have utilised Neota's "What you see is what you get" feature to give users proper scope to explain their personal circumstances and upload supporting documentation. The type of documentation users should upload is outlined here, and users may upload multiple documents by clicking the plus sign. Importantly, user testing showed that many people without legal backgrounds struggle to make their case in freeform and may be worried about what sort of information they should disclose to a court. To solve this problem while balancing it against the needs for users to describe their individual circumstances, we provide users with example sentences that they can copy, paste, and edit in the text box, a feature which is also helpful for users who are less tech savvy. Finally, the user's application is complete, and a personalised report outlining the conviction status and the user's rights in relation to the conviction is produced. They can choose to download it and/or have it emailed to them. Once the application is emailed out to the user, here is an example of how the form will appear. In the future, this feature can be upgraded so that the application is sent directly with the prescribed fee to the Magistrate's Court, Attorney General, and Chief Commissioner of Police. Thank you for taking the time to learn about SCV. We are now eager to respond to any questions you may have.
It was very good. I might go first while Kate and John come onto the screen. I didn't wake up this morning expecting to hear mention of Harry and Meghan, so you took me by surprise right from the get-go. Well done. I really liked the. There's a lot of aspects of the app that I really liked. Your logo is really cute in the top right-hand corner on your presentation screens as well. Very simple but clear graphics right throughout your application and your presentation as well. Nice use of the functionality within Neota with videos and so on. And as I started writing down questions that I had for you, I found you were answering them as you were going, which is a little bit frustrating because I don't have a lot for you now. But can you just talk to us a little bit about the interview process and the user testing that you went through? I got a sense of some of the types of people that you talked to. I'm particularly interested to understand whether you were able to do any user testing with people who would be the key users of the application itself, because I think you mentioned a sergeant and a criminal lawyer that I remember.
Yeah, that's a great question, Ellen, thank you. So you've hit the nail on the head with our kind of core issue when it came to user testing, which is we thought that it would be insensitive and inaccessible to reach out to people with convictions, or at least people who we know who have convictions. So instead, we reached out to a diverse group of 9 people from the outset and engaged them throughout the process. But we also reached out to 2 experts who we mentioned, so a criminal lawyer and a sergeant, so that they can talk to us about what they think their clients' core needs are. And that was really helpful for us. So one example is on the last screen. So on the application screen, we showed you how there's drop downs with information or examples they can copy and paste. So the experts were able to kind of give us insight into what a real life person with a conviction might need to say and what their personal circumstances might be.
Yeah, no, I like that feature. I thought it was going to be one of my questions, and then you had the answer there. So well done. Kate or John?
Look, can I add to sort of Alan's congratulations on both the presentation and the app that you've created. And I also had a number of questions that you answered along the way. I was particularly impressed with the obvious sensitivity you displayed to users of potential users of the app in terms of disclosing sensitive information, but also taking account of different levels of literacy, language, etc. My question is for perhaps the person who who goes in, accesses the information, but then wants to talk it through with someone. Do you have any capacity within the app for referrals or suggestions of, say, community legal centres that people might consult with?
Thanks for that question, Kate. I think that I think that sort of as we built our app at this stage, we were mindful that we weren't partnering up with any organisations yet. So we sort of steered clear with sort of tying ourselves down to one organisation or another. But I think as we built the app, we all became more and more passionate about the importance of the app and what it can, like the things it can offer to I guess our intended users. So I think that if we do take it to the next stage, I think one of the things we would try to do is to partner up with a community legal centre or the other organisations we did mention at the start of the presentation. And in that process, we would hopefully be able to have a referral process, a consultation process, something like that. So that if a user did want to seek some kind of human advice rather than just using the app, it would be built in some way.
Great.
I'm conscious of time. I thought it was a tour de force of what can be done. I really thought it was excellent. In the notes to the judges, it says it also uses Google Translate. Did any of you test out how that accurately that was representing the application in other languages as well?
Yeah, so we some speak other languages as well. So we did try with the ones that we did know as to how robust the app is. It does tend to do better with European languages, as suspected, because that's a bit closer to English. But even with Chinese, which I speak, I tried that for a little bit. You can get a gist of what's going on. It's not the most robust translation out there. And I think if, sort of building on what Gidon said, if we were able to take that to the next stage, we would try and look into proper translations or done by accredited translators that actually reflect the content of the app properly.
Yeah, well, congratulations. It's one of the best looking apps I've seen this year. It was really well done.
Thank you.
Well, I'll add my congratulations. Well done. Thank you so much for your presentations. And we are ready for the next lot of presentations from WeCare.
Good morning, I'm Susanna, and along with Joe, Ashane, Ava and Vidushi, we are the proud creators of WeCare. WeCare is an independent complaint system that enables users to make a record or a report of sexual misconduct that was experienced on university campuses. So first up, why did we build this app? I mean, these headlines, they say it all, but a key statistic that really spoke to us as a group was from a recent Human Rights Commission survey, which found that 1 in 2 students had been sexually assaulted in the year prior to the survey, with 50% of those assaults happening on campus. It took us a long time and many dead ends to work out how you could report sexual misconduct to Melbourne Uni, and we found that most of the reporting avenues were focused on data collection. From this, we then conducted some interviews and we identified our 2 key issues. The first, that universities do not solely advocate for the victim survivor. And as a result, the second issue is a widespread distrust of university reporting services, which obviously contributes to the lack of reporting. The need we identified is a third-party complaint service for sexual misconduct.
WeCare fills the gap identified by Susanna by taking a 3-prong approach to provide a comprehensive range of user-oriented services in one place. This way, we created an all-encompassing resource for users to access, which supersedes the current system in place at the university. First, WeCare provides the ability to make a record about an incident of sexual misconduct, which doubles as a report if they choose to send it to an external organization. This is an amalgamation and a refinement of the existing university complaints avenue. Next, it offers guidance on what sexual misconduct and consent is and provides answers to commonly asked questions in this area. Finally, it provides resources categorized as legal help and support services, with the latter broken down into both professional and community support. The resources listed are suitable for all individuals, regardless of gender, sexuality, race, and socioeconomic status. Underpinning everything WeCare does are the core values of empathizing, embracing, and empowering the user to make the best choice for themselves.
Now, let's walk you through the app. Meet Elle Woods. She's the first year of University of Melbourne students. She has recently moved here from overseas. She initially experienced a tutor, Mr. Callahan, inappropriately grabbing her during a lab last year. Now that they are studying at home during COVID, he has been sending her messages inappropriately commenting on what she's wearing via Zoom chat during class and persistently asking out on a date. Elle thinks that she might have been sexually harassed. She opened up the WeCare app. After watching 10 seconds of the consent video, which is made by our team, she realizes that Mr. Callahan's behavior was indeed inappropriate. Elle wants to report this, but she's worried that it might affect her visa or international scholarship. She looked through the FAQ section in the guidance module and realizes that these won't be affected, so she decides to report.
So when Elle decides to make a record, she presses on Record Incident. This will be the first page that pops up. It will explain to her that she should make separate records if there are more than one unrelated incidences, and it also reaffirms that she has full control over what happens with the information, whether she reports this or keeps this information to herself. Keeping this information to herself can be important because details about the incident can often be forgotten later down the road when someone may wish to take action. Furthermore, having all this information prepared can encourage a victim to seek help or even report. Below this, you can see what can be done once this record is created. As explained above, she can keep this information to herself, or she can report this to the university or even directly to the police. Here, Elle enters in her personal details. As an international student, when she clicks this, a pop-up will appear further restating that in doing so, the visa will not be affected. On this page, she will be asked to enter details specifically about the incident. Elle, like most victims, was especially triggered when confronted with reliving this event. Understanding this difficulty, we created a quick exit button at the top, which can be accessed at any time during this app to escape from their current page to a neutral Google homepage. She would now have to specify that she was a sole victim and choose what situation best describes the nature of events. Below this, she is also given the option to give a summary of the events that happened that day in her own words. I was also happy to see that when asked what gender she was, we were inclusive of more than 2 genders. We included gender neutral and an option not to say. Throughout our app, we have made it a point not only to respect everyone's gender, but also their sexual orientation. You may have noticed a lot of the resources are LGBTQ+ suitable. Now at the bottom, Elle is also able to upload any pictures or audio files and may be used as evidence. She has a screenshot of an important chat between her and the professor, and that will be uploaded now. Now Elle will need to specify when and where this incident occurred. This was a repeated issue, and the most recent incident happened last week during a Zoom chat. She remembers this date as well as a few prior dates. Given the first incident occurred on campus, she can also specify which campus this was. Here, Elle enters information about the wrongdoer. We notice that English may not be the first language for a lot of students at Uni Melb, and incorporated simple language like the use of the word wrongdoer instead of perpetrator. Given Elle knows the name of the wrongdoer, she can enter his name below. Here is the preview. We have Elle's personal details, her full account of the incident, as well as evidence that she has provided at the bottom. She is also given the option to edit her information. Elle decides not to change anything and presses next. This will bring her to a new page where she can download the new record as either a Word doc or PDF file. We will show you a preview of this now. Also on this page, Elle is given the option whether she'd like an email. Elle decides not to receive an email and then presses next at the bottom. Finally, Elle is brought to this page again, which relates what options can be done now that she has finished creating her record. At the bottom, she is given the option to leave feedback or to press start over if she wishes to make a new record or go through the guidance or resource tabs. I will now pass it on to Jo.
Thanks, Shane. So in the last section, I will share how we use human-centered design to achieve our objectives of empowering and empathizing with our users. Due to the nature of the content of WeCare, the potential users are likely emotionally vulnerable. So we made mindful design choices to create soothing but empowering user experience. For example, we conducted color research and survey to choose a suitable color palette and tested the palette to ensure colorblinded users have equal access to the contents. Based on this, we designed the logo, icons, and the whole layout to create a more encompassing user interface and deliver a trustworthy team image. For better user experience, we also responded to a series of user testings. We added features to upload evidence and provide tailored support to women, men, and the people who identify as gender diverse. We also added built-in text translators so that all users can read in their native language for better comprehension. Along the way, we took on many roles, but what distinguishes our app is that it's made for students by students. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Congratulations. I'll hand over to the judges.
Looks like I'm first on again. Well done. That was excellent. This stage just continues to surprise me. Harry and Megan, and then references to Clueless. Well done. I really liked the core values. I thought, you know, the way you wrapped it up at the end with the set, just a little bit on human-centered design, really did reinforce the steps that you've gone through to create something that is genuinely empathetic, and it comes through right from the beginning. So well done. What's my question for you? Have you thought about other potential uses? So you focused very clearly on sexual misconduct. Just thinking about it, it seems that you could quite easily extend this to a whole load of other things that would be potential breaches of the university's code of conduct. Is that something you thought about as a possible extension?
Yeah, I think we were really conscious about the scope of the app and what could happen within the sexual misconduct space. I mean, we see a gap in the market across national and international university campuses in the sexual misconduct space. But as you said, there are so many different breaches of university policies, and there's a big barrier between students' understanding of the policies and what action they can take. So we can expand it within the sexual misconduct route and also to other breaches moving forward.
Yeah, no, it's well done. There's a clear gap, and it does fill it very nicely. John, okay.
Kate, after you.
Oh, look, again, congratulations from me. And look, I really liked the way in which you had very carefully thought about the user experience, and again, the sensitivity of the kind of information being input and the person's, I guess, experience of it. I noted that you also had facility for bystanders or I guess others indirectly impacted by sexual misconduct to input. And I wondered if you could talk just a little bit about that aspect of the app.
Yeah, so with that aspect, because we realize that there may be people that might have witnessed something quite horrific, whether it was through a professor or through another student that may harassed or done something more serious to another student. So we wanted to input an ability for someone that may have saw this or may have heard about this through other students or other peers to be able to at least give them an option to report, especially if something serious has happened. We understand maybe the victim isn't in a place to reach out, but if the wrongdoer isn't held accountable, we thought that should be something we should look into. Again, there's no proof that this will go to the police or it will be taken further, but we just wanted to give the option just in case someone saw something and wanted to report it.
My question is more about the future of the app. You mentioned that students have some reticence in reporting to the university and whatever university mechanisms there are. Were you able to identify, in effect, a future home or future sponsor for this? Is there something like a third party that, say, the G8 your statistics at the start were quite comprehensive, the entire Australian university market and all education markets, of course. But was your research into how the future of this app might look, did that identify any potential sponsors or initiatives that might find a home for this app?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that one of the potential partners that we identified was UMSU, which is the student union at University of Melbourne. Currently, this is rolling out an app in this area is actually on their agenda. And given that they are housed within the university, but they're pretty independent in the fact that they're student run, they have a lot of resources on this area. We thought that that would be a really good mediator and a really good home, a potential home for the app. We actually had a chance to speak to a few people from UMSU, and they had they were very encouraging about the idea, and they were also in alignment about what the current issues were. So that was one partner that we identified.
Thanks. That's great.
Yeah. One really quick follow-up question from me. There's a lot of sensitive information that you're collecting as part of this process. Did your user testing and the interviews and things that you did, were people concerned about what might happen with that data and once it's in the platform?
So throughout the platform, we make it very clear that this data doesn't have to be sent out at all. Like, the option of just keeping this information to yourself is, we try to highlight that as much as possible, because we understand, obviously the information is sensitive and there'll be a large proportion of people that might not want to send it out at all. But I think creating this record, for example, will either encourage people to seek help or to report it later down the road. And that's the best we can do at this moment. So we want to encourage people to either seek help, whether that's through counselling or community support groups. We have a lot of those options in our resources pages. But overall, we just want to encourage them to do what they think is best. And by allowing them to use this app and even create something that they can keep to themselves, they're more likely to do it knowing they have full control.
And I'll just quickly tack on the end of that and say that we make it clear on the app that we're not collecting their information. We're just kind of a facilitator for them to input the data, get an output, and do with it whatever they choose at the end.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thank you so much. An excellent presentation. The next application is TaxSmart Student Edition.
A very good morning to everyone. My name is Tina, and along with E, Mason, and Nicholas, I'm delighted for this chance to show you our app, TaxSmart Student Edition, a comprehensive and modular tax return guide building Neota Logic Studio for working university students. Having spoken to fellow students, the need for TaxSmart was clear. The average student we found was close to clueless about how to lodge a tax return. And while all the information and much of the advice a university student would need is readily available all over the internet, it is not easy for one person to get all the information they actually need together. In fact, it took 4 people a few weeks to do so. As a concept, TaxSmart aims not just rectify this situation, but to go the extra step and provide our user base with detailed advice on how and what exactly to fill in their form with the ATO. I first need to explain what exactly our goals were with TaxSmart and what we aim to provide. We'll call these our guiding principles. The first is accuracy, which goes without saying. We want TaxSmart to be a reliable source of advice and information. The second is efficiency. We've designed this app to create as welcoming and intuitive a user experience as possible, especially since our user base will essentially be completely new to tax laws. And finally, you may have noticed that we have called our app TaxSmart Student Edition. This is because our third guiding principle is portability. We have organized and designed our backend in such a way that a TaxSmart can provide a detailed and streamlined experience tailored to many different user groups. All it would take is a bit of research into that base, into their common tax concerns, and industry standard types of income and deductions. And that's a whole new TaxSmart. We'll do our best to show you these concepts in action as we run through this app. So without further ado, here's our title screen. I'll now hand over to Yi.
Thank you, Tina. Hello, everyone. My name is C. I'm going to introduce you to the preliminary part of our app. Here is our first page. We aim to convey at least 2 ideas to the user here. First, this is guide to tax return. And second, this is tailored for university students. We also have a Google Translate function here. Next, we have a disclaimer and a privacy policy. And on the next page, we have a eligibility test. The reason we have it here is because we really want to let the user know as early as possible whether this app is sufficient tool for them. In the case the user fails this test, we will notify them of a reason, as in why they failed. Next, we have a very short video explaining some key concepts of Australian taxation system. In the case the user doesn't want to read it, we have all the information listed here for them to read. Next, we have a residency test. The reason why it's important is because if you're a foreign tax resident, your tax rate and tax structure will be fundamentally different from those of Australian tax residents. So this is a 3-step test. On the first page, you see some preliminary questions, and if the user fails, we'll send them to the second part, which we call a weighted scoring test. We designed this part to imitate the thinking of a lawyer in deciding someone's residency. And as you can see, there are many questions, each has many options. Each option has their own weighting. We derive those weightings from ATO. ATO has a facial residency tool, which is quite excessive for our purpose because there are many choices that are meaningless for university students. So we make our own tool, but we reverse engineer the ATO tool and use the weighting in our own app. Before we finish this part, it's worth mentioning that our app is designed with the idea of modularity in mind. A good example will be this residency test. It's a module, it's standalone and independent in its own logic, so you can extract it from this app without affecting the function of other parts of the app. Now I hand it over to Nick, who will take you through the function modules of this app.
Thanks, E. And just on this section here on types of income, that's another example of modularity, because for TaxSmart Student Edition, well, only one page is needed, one page that tells the student what kind of income we're accepting and that the types of income that we're not sort of considering because it's outside the purview of most university students. But if we make TaxSmart, for example, Business Edition, then this module, which is its own module, would include income from business types, for example, where the user can determine whether their income that they're receiving is from a business or from property or from services. And this is important because the ATO treats these amounts differently. Now, without further ado, let's say that we have our user, Miss MK, and let's say that she's not receiving any income from overseas. So now what the app wants to do is to gather information about income from these types, which is the most prevalent among university students. So let's say that she does have a job and she's receiving income from it as a tutor in the university. She's earning $19,000 a year. just to put her above the tax threshold. She's receiving just youth allowance and no other government payments. And she's not receiving any of these other types of income that the ATO treats the same way. So when we get to deductions, of course, this will affect the user's tax liability. And what appears in this deduction section depends on what the user puts into their in the income section. So first we have employment expenses. We have the general rules on what can be deducted and what cannot be, as well as examples that are specific to the occupation that the user chose. Let's say that Ms. MK only has one deduction, and that's a textbook cost for the total of $50 and no other deduction. She didn't have a foreign income, nor did she have any other types of income. So those pages aren't going to appear here. And just like that, we have our last question here about whether she's planning to leave Australia permanently. And let's say that she's not. And finally here, we have the tax liability section, and it contains all the calculations that we've done, as well as the tax liability, her tax liability, assuming that she has recorded all of the income she received with us. And just with that, I will leave it to Mason to discuss the report.
At the end, our app provides the user with a custom-tailored report on each of the addressed issues, fully integrated with both written and visual guidance on how to fill out every single section of the tax return from beginning to end. This means a complete step-by-step walkthrough with customized screenshots from the ATO's My Tax form and simple, comprehensive instructions tailored to the user's specific situation based on their inputs. The seamless correspondence between the report and the user interface that the user will actually use for completing the tax return means guesswork is entirely eliminated. With both written instructions and annotated illustrations on exactly what to type in each field, which buttons to click, and which checkboxes to select, completing a tax return couldn't be easier. This personalized guide can be downloaded as a PDF and also sent to the user's email address. And in case the user wants further assistance, say with more complex issues not covered by the current build of our app, we've also referred them to the Melbourne Law School Tax Clinic. Finally, we want our app to continue to be constantly improved based on the latest experience of real users with real tax issues. That's why we include an option for the user to provide feedback after using the app, thus allowing us to constantly deliver the best user experience possible. To conclude, tax time can be a considerable hassle for many university students. TaxSmart Student Edition saves them the trouble and confusion of manually navigating the ATO's complex and convoluted website by providing a streamlined means of accessing targeted and comprehensive answers to common tax issues faced by most students. Furthermore, we are confident that the modularity of this proof of concept allows seamless expansion to cater to countless other user groups and other functions. Thank you. We'll now accept questions.
Congratulations. Well done. A lot of work involved in that, particularly in the issues of tax. So maybe we'll start off with John and then go John, Kate and Alan this time round.
Sure. Congratulations. In fact, it's an application close to my heart. Our largest client at Neota Logic is Thomson Reuters, and their particular thing is for their tax division. They have over 250 apps deployed in tax advisory services, and you know, it's a tremendously rules-based, calculation-based limitation. Many of the strengths of the platform for solving, you know, what is ultimately a repetitive advisory process, is not necessarily easy. And I did appreciate the you know, the levels of complexity that you addressed in that application. And so I guess, again, I mean, every application can be improved over time, but you need a sponsor. Did you have any discussions with the tax clinic or the university, or even, you know, I think I read that 40% of students at Melbourne are overseas students. I think that would be pretty representative of most universities in Australia. What do you see as a potential future home for the app so that it can actually go on and live and help people in the real world.
Lisa, did you want to take this one and I'll fill in the blanks?
Yep, sure. So at this stage of our development of our proof of concept, we haven't made direct contact with any potential sponsors yet. However, it is something that we have thought through a lot. So firstly, we have thought of it being integrated with the ATO itself, actually. And one advantage of this is that allows an opportunity to bridge our app with the ATO's MyTax function, which presents a considerable opportunity for synergy, so that those inputs and outputs through our app can be directly transferred into the ATO's MyTax system. And then secondly, the other broad category of user groups we thought about would be for example, University Student Union, student services, student clubs, student associations, etc., who speak directly with students to have that as part of their websites. And we're confident that both these avenues would present considerable opportunities for sponsorship for our app to deliver effective capability.
Thanks, that's great.
Look, congratulations to all of you. I think this is a fantastic fantastic app, and I'm impressed with your ambition. TaxSmart Student Edition. I can imagine a bit like Monopoly, and we will have TaxSmart, next edition TaxSmart, in various iterations. I'm interested in your user testing that you might have done, and I guess picking up on John's point about international students being, perhaps one of the, obvious target groups for the app, about accessibility, both language, but in terms of other needs, visual, auditory, that kind of thing.
Thanks, Kate. So we've actually started out on TaxSmart for international students specifically, but then we thought as well that actually the same principles apply for international students and regular students. So we wanted to make it as accommodating as possible to international students, which is why while we have the Google Translate function, we're also cognizant that it's not going to work perfectly much of the time. That's why we also designed our language design choices were such that we used simple English, but we also kept in mind very important terms that are in text. When we don't try to sort of paraphrase those, they appear as is, but we provide a definition that they can see as they work through the app. There was also, we also thought about the font size that we were going to use. It might not have been seen perfectly because of the resolution of my computer, but it's a pretty large font size that should be accessible for even the visually impaired, we think. And also as well, there's videos. We had one video, but we could have more that will help people sort of who are not very comfortable with reading all of these concepts.
Great.
Well done. I think you've done a great job of simplifying something that can be quite confusing for a lot of people, not just students. It's tax returns and going through that process is daunting for a lot of people, isn't it? I think there's a couple of things that came to mind for me. One was sort of Kate's question. You mentioned in the notes that accompanied this, so the summary, that you had some input from users, and I got the sense a lot of that was really around trying to understand the problem that you were then seeking to solve through this. Did you go back and do some user testing as you were building the app out to get the sense of the usability and the user experience in completing it? And what did you learn out of that process?
Yes, we conducted a very extensive user testing throughout the entirety of the design process. I'd say the biggest challenge that we firstly identified and it gradually overcame through the user testing process was just how long and verbose actually the app was. Even in the most recent build before this build, it was still a lot more verbose than this. So there was definitely a lot of time spent cutting down on the number of pages, the number of words, breaking things down, just simple things like bolding, underlining, colors, and even adding those small graphical icons to make it a better user experience. That was certainly our main effort through the user testing process.
Great, thank you. Well done.
Thank you, students. Well done. Excellent presentation as well. Thank you. All right, we're moving to the next presentation, which is On My Terms.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to On My Terms. My name is Jake, and my teammates are Joanna, Jane, and Tish. Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge that Melbourne Law School sits on the Wurundjeri land of the Kulin Nation. We pay our respect to their past, present, and emerging. On My Terms is developed to empower individual consumers and small businesses who enter into contracts to purchase goods and services in Victoria. The app educates users and help them detect any unfair contract terms which are harmful to their interests in their contract. Do you know that according to studies, more than 99% of consumer contracts that we sign today are in standard form? The unfair contract term regime was introduced 10 years ago to solve the power imbalance in this kind of contracts between consumers and traders, but these terms are still very prevalent today. For example, here I'm showing you a highlighted contract of Apple Music, which many of us subscribe to. This clause is likely unfair because it says Apple has the right to unilaterally suspend their services without any notice to consumers and without any penalties. That's why last year, the Treasury actually conducted a report and found out that the unfair contract term regime is ineffective, largely due to a lack of awareness and education campaign. If the status quo remains, the report says this could have devastating impacts on small businesses and consumers. This situation might be exacerbated by COVID-19 as well. As it currently stands, the ACCC does provide guidance on unfair contract terms, but according to our user testing, 80% of interviewees found it not very useful. There's just simply too much information and it lacks straightforward guidance. It's not interactive at all. That's why we developed On My Terms to raise awareness and empower users. Now I pass it on to Tish, who will talk to you about the objectives of our app.
Thank you, Jake. That was great. So very briefly, our app covers 3 objectives: educate, assist, and act. Educate. Right from the outset, through a mix of audiovisual mediums, such as videos and bright pictures, 51 original example scenarios, and pop-up definitions in simple language, the app provides comprehensive knowledge to the user that the user needs to contextualize the concept of unfair terms with their current circumstances. Moving on to advice. Armed with the relevant knowledge, we handhold the user through the law, all that in a total of 4 steps. Everything the new user needs is at their fingertips. Wondering what terms are even unfair? We have them clearly categorized. Unsure of what a term means? The definition is right there, a click away. A phrase on your contract is too vague. Match it with one of our 51 examples. But that's not all. The app helps you act. You can send off a formal email to the seller enforcing your rights if you choose to. The app will also send you an email containing a report of all the information you need to escalate the issue further, or come back to it later if you choose to defer action. Now moving on to some of our key features. Based on the feedback we got from our users, we built features encompassing 3 broad design considerations. We built the app to be integrated and interactive, informative and specialized, and finally accessible. This last feature was especially important to our group and me as a person with a learning disability. I will now hand it over to Joanna to give you an in-depth tour of some of these features and explain what I meant.
Thank you, Tish. On the slide are screenshots of our video, which we have included on the first page of the app. We chose to include an explainer video as they can effectively combine audio and visual stimulus to explain a concept in a simple and understandable way. This morning, I will be using the character of Jill from the video to demonstrate our app. She is a subscriber of Apple Music, and Jill is experiencing user outage and wants a refund, but Apple refuses to refund her. The customer service rep tells her that Apple can suspend the service without a refund. Luckily, Jill has our app. After Jill reviews the introduction video on the app, she moves on the threshold questions to see if the unfair contract term applies to her contract. The infographic on the right has been intentionally designed to appear as Jill clicks through each question. This is so that Jill is not overwhelmed by the infographic and only relevant and necessary information will appear. After this initial stage, Jill will be taken to the next page where she can learn the categories of the unfair contract terms and see which one is applicable to her. She will see options of drop-down boxes, hyperlinks, and a raise hand emoji, which are all integrated throughout the app with a heavy focus on user accessibility to break down any further complex terms Jill may have trouble understanding. Jill clicks on the unilateral term button, where she sees the example phrasing and scenarios, as well as image description icons for users who may require screen readers. The combination of these functions are intentional, as through user testing, we found that scenarios and phrasing significantly improve the user experience, as it is language proved to be both digestible and relatable. The final language that you see here today is our 3rd edition edit and has also been sent through a readability score checker. As Jill's second language is English, she can also use the Google Translate function embedded in the app. I will now pass on to Jane, who will explain Jill's next steps with our output functions.
Thank you, Joanna. So after Jill finishes her assessment on the unfair terms, we come to the final stage where our app offers several types of outputs. First, our app provides Jill a report. Here is a snapshot of it. It lists what kind of unfair terms were in the contract and why they were unfair, and what steps to take after that. And this report will also be emailed to Jill automatically. So now that Jill has a report, what else can she do? The first thing the app recommends is to negotiate with the business to amend the terms in the contract. The app has already prepared a negotiating email notifying the seller of the unfair terms and asking the seller to amend them. And once Jill is satisfied, she can send the email by pressing the submit button. Now, if negotiation doesn't work, then on this final page, the app recommends 2 further options. Jill can file a complaint to compliance agencies. For example, Jill can contact the ACCC to report the business, or Consumer Affairs Victoria to help resolve her issue with the seller. In the 3rd step, if the agencies cannot resolve the dispute, the app suggests to seek legal advice as the final option, providing links to the Law Institute of Victoria's referral service, or to find their nearest community legal center. So where do we see the future of the OnMyTerms app? Legislative reform to enhance the unfair contract term regime is currently underway, and this includes harsher penalties for businesses as well. So that will broaden the audience of our app to businesses who want to make sure that they comply with the regime. We also believe that the app can be integrated into ACCC or the Consumer Affairs Victoria's websites to offer more interactive alternative to educating users. And also post-reform, the app could act as a platform for these bodies to collect data on market practice and monitor the effectiveness of the reform. And that showcases our app. Thank you everyone for your time, and we look forward to your questions.
Congratulations, well done. All right, I'll hand it over to the judges.
I'm happy to go first. Look, congratulations, team. Look, I guess like the last app, this is really a case of a complex legislative and sort of bureaucratic regime that you have translated for actual users, and congratulations on that. I think it looks great. You know, visually, it's really engaging, and I'm very impressed by the clear care and thought you've put into breaking down this sort of very complex and potentially overwhelming area of law into bite-sized chunks, not too much information, and lots of use of hyperlinking and underlining. So well done there. Look, I did have a question about how people would find out about the app, and so I was interested that you would look at linking to the ACCC or to CAV as a way into that. So you have, in a sense, answered my question there. Look, I guess I'm interested in the sort of the education part of that, and whether you sort of how you see that playing out, and whether you see that as sort of the major task or the complaints section as sort of the major task.
Yeah, I'm happy just to take this question, and then my teammates can add on anything that I've missed out. So the education part is definitely the most important feature that we have. This is because even as law students, we find this information hard to understand. So we thought, if we can't even understand it, how can normal consumers or small businesses take this information in? And as Jake has shown, the ACCC website is not the most accessible. The reports that we found out are actually hundreds of pages long, and they barely have any scenarios as well. So the first limb of our development is definitely the educational part. Without knowing your rights, you can't exercise your rights. So a huge part of it is empowering the user to, even if they don't make a complaint, they know what they need to do if they want to do so. So the output on the complaints is definitely, I guess, the cherry on top of the education, but really it's an empowerment so that people can understand and exercise the rights, because I think everyone in this room would have signed the terms and conditions that we might not have read properly. And that was sort of our thought process into our preliminary user testing as well.
Shall I go, John?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Cool. Just to echo some of Kate's comments, I thought you've done a really nice job with the colours. Kate didn't mention the infographics, so I'll call them out. I thought there was a really nice way of taking people through what is a convoluted and challenging journey, working your way through the law. Yeah, and the unfair term stuff I am quite familiar with, and it is quite challenging. I think you've done a very nice job of presenting it in a way that will be understandable for people. Like, I've got two questions for you. I found myself wondering when I saw the pre-populated email for the user to send to the seller, what would I do if I received that as a seller? And I have a funny feeling I might just go, that's interesting, and leave it in the inbox. So I was wondering if you had any thought about, or if you had thought about engaging with any potential sellers, so people on the seller side of the platform, I guess, about how they might respond and the type of information that might be useful for them when a complaint of that nature is submitted to them. So that's one question. Answer that one, I'll give you the second one after.
Well, Alan, I can jump in on that one. So in our user testing, we primarily focused on users because at the end of the day, we had to be mindful of what the scope of this app is and how far it could reach. But in keeping that in mind, I do think that one of our users also doubled up as a person who does own a business. And from their end, what we tried to do after taking their feedback was to, even the letter we draft, make it as simple as we can while retaining the legal integrity and argument within the letter. So that is the extent of how much we consulted sellers. But at the end of the day, we also had at the back of our mind that if you're reaching out to a business such as Apple, they probably have access to a legal team. And that is something that they probably can navigate even within their own capacity and resources. And at the end of the day, while making contracts with unfair terms are not illegal, you still can. The contracts are voidable, provided the court says that they are voidable. So in that circumstance, I think we've made that pretty clear in our email. And we just expect them to be responsive. And if not, then ACC will probably be reaching out to them, or they will be logged on ACC. So there's that deterrence as well toward them.
Yep, thanks, Amtesh.
I also want to add on to that with Amtesh's point. In the email that we sent to the seller, we included the contract clause that had the unfair term, and we explained why that was unfair. And so that would give the seller a chance to look through the contract and figure out how to amend it with the reasons, by considering the reasons that we put in.
Yep, thanks, Jane. My second question, we're collecting a bit of information through the app with the data that people are submitting as they're responding to different queries. The other thing that struck me is whether or not the aggregated data would be useful for policy formulation. I just wondered whether you'd thought about that as a possible extension.
I'm happy to take that question.
Yeah.
And I think Jane sort of touched on that in her part of the presentation. A big direction that we see our app is heading towards is definitely analyzing those aggregated data. for policymakers and for regulators. I think if should we receive any funding in the future, we would love to integrate this onto ACCC's website. And we will also put disclaimer on and terms and conditions on how we are going to analyze users' data. And last but not least, we would like to offer users the possibility to insert what is the counterparty that they're dealing with. So if users choose to do that, we will sort of obtain the idea that what kind of industry and what kind of traders in what industry seems to have a lot of complaints from different users. And I don't know if you have noticed, but the color scheme of our app actually is a happy coincidence that it matches ACCC's brand color. So that's just some added feature.
Thanks, Jack, and well done, everyone. John, anything from you?
No, I do want to compliment you on the design elements of the app. It's an intractable problem. I'm with Alan in his comments. I can't imagine. I can imagine that letter sitting in Mark Zuckerberg's inbox for a very long time. You know, at the end of the day, perhaps these are, while it's important to be able to report, quantify, and I like the point about the data analysis, data aggregation. One of the important things that structured apps offered broadly do create the opportunity for analytics, and it'd be terrific if the ACCC were to sponsor it and see that opportunity. But it would be an opportunity, I think, at the end of the day, to bring in legislation that prevented the drafting of the clauses like the one we saw in the Apple terms and conditions. That's the problem.
Thank you, John. Thank you, team. Again, it's very interesting to watch this, and as you see the rest of the apps, to see what opportunities government work gives to people to actually fix the way it communicates legislation and information to consumers. We have two more presentations to go. The next one is Infraction Action.
Okay, well, good morning to our judges and audience. My name is Frances, and the other members of my team here are Arif, Tommy, and Sanjana. The Neota Logic-based application that we've created is called Infraction Action. So fines or infractions have the potential and do create significant debt for Victorians if not dealt with promptly. For example, the $80 parking infringement that you got, if you leave it unpaid, becomes almost 4 times the original amount once it reaches the final stage of the fine's life cycle. As you can imagine, if someone continues to accrue fines, the total amount payable moves very quickly into the thousands. What our app gives users is the best available option for dealing promptly with their fines. And it then goes the next step and helps them to draft the documents that they need to make an application for review. Our vision was for this app to integrate with the Fines Victoria website, taking the pressure off Fines Victoria customer service and improving the user experience with this body. So I'd like to introduce you now to Bob. Bob is a young adult. He's received a $1,500 fine from Victoria Police for breaching curfew. He believes the fine's unfair. He was rescuing his cat who had escaped from the house after 9 p.m. He forgets about his initial fine and finds a reminder to pay in his mailbox. So Bob has sat down at his computer, opened Infraction Action with a copy of his infringement notice in front of him.
So Bob is an Australian citizen and over the age of 18, but users that would be better supported by additional legal services we filter out early on. We provide exit points to youth law, refugee services, and community legal centres to give those clients a more hands-on approach for their infringements. By sending out emails with the relevant information of the user, we can still allow the user the benefit of the app whilst providing summary information to the relevant body. Bob has one infringement with the value of $1,500, but Infraction Action has the capability to help individuals with multiple fines as well. As Bob continues on with the app, he will come across the 2 main components of Infraction Action, which are to educate the user and provide them with the solution for their infringement. The solution aspect of the app has the capability to deal with any type of infringement, as the process for review is the same. Whilst our education component currently focuses on COVID-19 and helmet fines to provide clarity around those laws, it also has the potential to cover any sort of infringement. This is to help the user understand their infringements and the options available to them, which will in return help us to determine how the app can help the user. We aim to provide a tangible output for the user to action off the infringement with template letters. Often, other options in the field provide users with the information about their fines, but do not provide tailored options for the user. By collaborating with the above-mentioned organizations, we can provide them with the user summary report and seamlessly transfer them over. For users like Bob that continue on with Infraction Action, Tommy will guide you through the process.
Once we've confirmed that Bob is someone who we can truly assist, we can help him navigate the various options that he has to pay off his fine. Our objective at this stage is to essentially narrow down Bob's options as much as possible by taking into account his personal situation. The first question we ask him is who issued his fine. This is because depending on who issued the fine, Bob would be supplied with a very different set of solutions. If you recall, Bob received his fine from a police officer, so he selects the agency button. Now on this page, Bob is asked to select the stage of his fine and input information about his fine, as well as some personal information. Since Bob forgot to pay his fine at the initial stage, he has a penalty reminder, so he'll select that option. Once all the sections below are filled out as well, Bob can move on to the next page. Here, Bob is asked if he experienced any special circumstances. If he did, he'd be able to apply for a special review with Fines Victoria. The types of circumstances acknowledged by Fines Victoria are listed out and also explained. As for Bob, none of these really pertain to him, so he will select none of these apply to me. Since we've learned that a special review does not apply to Bob, we're interested to see if there are any other avenues he might be able to pursue. Two other options that Fines Vic provides is either to apply for a review for unfair fines or to pursue a payment plan. We provide Bob with an explanation as to what each option is, and since Bob feels that the fine was issued unfairly because he only broke curfew to rescue his cat, he will choose the unfair fines option. And at this stage, we've successfully narrowed down Bob's options to applying for a review for an unfair fine. Here, Bob can press the underlined text to read a description of what each ground of review is. And once he reads the description for exceptional circumstances, he believes that it applies to him, and he'll select that option. And now that we've singled out one particular solution for Bob, which is to apply for a review, we can help him write the letter, which is required to be attached to his application. Above each text box here is a set of instructions, as well as some guiding sentences on the right, which will be able to help Bob as he writes about a situation. After Bob finishes filling out these boxes, he can press next to access his output. But before we move on to showing you the output, I'd like to briefly demonstrate how multiple fines work within our app. And the preliminary questions are largely the same as in the single fine pathway. A big difference, however, is this page, which is where we collect user information. Essentially, what we've done is streamline the process to fit on a single page. And to achieve this, we've used Neota's multiple instances feature. This feature allows the user to quickly fill out multiple forms and also easily access information if need be. In this manner, we're able to cut out any redundancies of having to run through the earlier process multiple times. And now Sanjana will run you through the outputs that we produce.
So ultimately what we've done is we've worked through Bob's available options and given him a very direct, concrete, actionable, his best option. This is summarized in a report that we generate for him, which we also email to him alongside anything else he needs, which is either further instructions or drafted letters of review. Bob gets something similar when he works with multiple fines as well, but the trade-off in streamlining this process is that we cannot offer fully populated letters at this time. He instead has to refer to the report and the transcript we provide to manually fill in the provided templates himself. Ideally, if we were seamlessly integrated with Fines Victoria, this would mean that we would just be able to submit Bob's review for him. or in the case of other options, at least pre-fill over 70% of his online application. This is currently not possible. So instead, Bob's experience with Infraction Action leaves him having understood exactly what he can do with his fine, how he can do it, how long he has to do it, what happens if he does nothing, and any documents he needs to submit, pre-drafted to the fullest extent possible. He isn't simply left to stare at his computer screen with a wall of options and all confused. Dealing with fines should be this simple, and that's Infraction Action. We're happy to take questions now.
Congratulations, team. Well done. All right, over to the judges.
Did you have any discussions with Fines Victoria about integrating?
Not at this stage. I think that would be our ideal endpoint. We would want this app to work as almost a decision-making tool for the people who are dealing with fines, because Fines Victoria doesn't necessarily help you narrow down your options. It just gives you a bunch of options and you are left to decide what is best on your own.
Right. Community, it puts me in mind, Gary, of one you did some years back with, was one of the Northwestern.
It was in our first year, John. It was with Mallee Family Care. So it was nine
Exactly.
classes ago.
Yeah. And this is a class and a race issue. Is people aggregate these fines, can't pay them, and they keep grossing up till they get to imprisonment issues. So it's very important. But the is there any peak organization of community legal service organizations that you could approach that could possibly implement it to guide their counselors in helping people ameliorate their fines?
Yeah, that's a possibility. I think our original sort of like what prompted the idea of making this app is that some of us, including myself, have been working in CLCs and dealing or seeing clients coming in with these infringements. So whilst we kind of weren't able to partner with an organisation while we were creating this app, I think that, yeah, that's a possibility. I know the CLC that I'm a part of has actually set up like a separate infringements clinic in order to deal with this, because it's such a big component of clients' issues in amongst other legal issues.
The first programmer I ever hired here in Melbourne was arrested the first day I sent him to a client. Client happened to be the precursor of the Australian Crime Commission, and when they did a background check on him to let him into the premises, they arrested him on the spot. He'd been a Melbourne University student who hadn't paid any parking fine through the course of his
Infraction Action, he'd be aware of his fines then, I guess.
He would indeed.
I had to pay all the damn fines to get him back to the program.
I really liked I liked a lot of aspects of the app that you've created. I right from the get-go, I think, Ariba, you were describing the filtering process. Yeah, you've thought about some really nice elements like that come through very strongly as you go through the app as a whole. So well done. My questions are really quite probably a little bit more generic this time around. So if you'd had more time, what else would you have done? And also, now that you're at this end of the process, so you've done your presentation, knowing what you know now, what would you have done differently?
I think one of the main things that we would love to do is to have the collaboration with like either Fines Vic or CLCs, because I feel like those would be the organizations that can possibly make the best use out of Infraction Action and able to try and get it to as many people as possible. So our app, even though it filters out some people early on, it still caters for a large majority of people that would probably benefit from this app. And again, the people that we do filter out are the ones that probably need more hands-on approach in trying to help their fines. So I think, yeah, in terms of those organizations would probably be best to try and get the word out as much as possible. In terms of anything different, I'll throw over to my teammates here if they want to add anything to that.
I think if we had more time, I would have liked to maybe expand on the type of fines that we try to educate the user on, because there are some fines which do have a little bit more nuances that need to be added to the process, and we didn't necessarily have the time or capacity to add all of them in. Like ideally, I think if this app would be able to cater to any fine that you're dealt with, not just the two that we have worked with right now. So just expand on that.
I mean, yeah, like at the moment, our app has almost the functionality to deal with most fines, even though our education component has just dealt with two. But we recognize there would be some additional information that we'd have to add. So for instance, some speeding offences like drink driving offences, they're not eligible for review. So in that sense, we'd have to add in a different pathway for that to say, well, you can't have this option.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It feels like you've built the underlying logic though, so it would be a relatively straightforward process to expand it out from here. Well done. Kate?
Look, I think most of my questions have been covered, but I'll add my congratulations and a couple of comments. I did have one question about sort of user testing and your own experience. And I think, Francis, you have in part answered that. This is a really, a perennial and ongoing issue with CLCs. And I think even if it can take, a relatively small component of the work that comes to CLCs and, effectively allow users to help themselves, it will have served an enormous purpose. One very quick question, just about accessibility and any user testing in that regard.
Yeah, so most of the user testing we did was amongst family and friends. And so I think because, as Arid mentioned, our audience base was like trying to be as wide as possible, in that sense, we had to kind of hit a middle ground. So things like just using simplified English. The other thing, to balance with that though, that we had to do was, because we wanted to integrate it with Fines Victoria, we also wanted to use a lot of the terms that they use on the website. So we tried to get rid of legal jargon where possible, but then also keep the consistency of language with Fines Victoria, just thinking of the user, wanting to, thinking of like the future integration, I guess, with that.
Yep.
Right, well, congratulations. Thank you so much for the presentation. Okay, we're now moving to the final presentation of this morning, NDIS Access Now.
Hi everyone, my name's Ben, and on behalf of the team, I bring you NDIS Access Now, an app that revolutionizes the NDIS access process through the principles of human-centered design. Most of our team have a lived experience of disability or have worked in disability legal and educational sectors. This experience has enabled us to appreciate how difficult the NDIS can be for users to understand and navigate. First, though, some context. As you know, the NDIS provides support to people with disabilities, their families, and carers. It is predicated upon a human rights model of disability. As such, the scheme is predicted to reach 1.5% of total GDP by next year. However, culturally and linguistically diverse CALD people can be left out of the scheme because the access process is inaccessible, resulting in less than half the number of CALD peoples on the scheme than there should be. This means that the human rights basis of the NDIS is undercut by indirect discrimination. As such, people with disabilities, especially CALD peoples with disabilities and their carers, are the target users of our app. To understand the problem more, let's meet Belle. Belle is a collation of case studies, research, and user interviews we conducted. Belle is a young Afghani woman and has epilepsy and is colorblind. She and her mum came to Australia on permanent humanitarian visas from Afghanistan. Her mum, aged 66, also has an acquired brain injury after surviving accidents in Afghanistan. Belle's been unable to find work in Australia because of her and her mum's support needs. Belle, though, has heard from friends that she should apply to the NDIS so that they can get support and she can find work again. She gets paper copies of the access request form, which she needs to submit for access to the NDIS. Now I'll pass to Jay to explain how Belle goes.
Thank you, Ben. Bell notices the access request form is only available in English. The questions are complex and overwhelming. She does find an easy read version of the NDIS website, but it's only relevant for participants, not new applicants. Bell's only choice is to complete the access request form without guidance, easy read, or translation. As a result, the forms aren't completed correctly. Section 2 of the access request form needs to be filled out by a healthcare professional. She goes to her family GP but can't communicate effectively with them because of the language barrier. Further, her doctor is unfamiliar with the NDIS and doesn't complete the form to best practice. The forms are swiftly rejected. Bell's upset and confused. Her and her mum need support now. The lack of access to support is an infringement of Article 5 of the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. The next week, Bell is sent a link to NDIS Access Now from another friend. On the welcome page of NDIS Access Now, Bell finds instructions on how to use the app, as well as a welcome video outlining the same. The welcome page says that Bell can translate the app into a variety of languages, and that everything has been written in a language style called Easy Read. This means everything is written in an easy to read way, and pictures and videos are used to help. Bell is also told that pop-ups are used throughout the app to explain some terms, and that she now has 2 options. She can learn more about disability in the NDIS, or she can start to fill out the access request form to apply. This simple process manages the risks that Bell and her mum face by providing equity of access. Bell chooses not to use the Pashto translation because she can understand the English in the Easy Read format provided. I'll pass to Greta now to demonstrate in detail how the app helps Bell to access the NDIS.
Thanks, Jay. Entering the education section of the app, the pop-up function means that Bell is not overwhelmed by information being presented all at once. This aligns with our user research that simplicity of presentation style is a key priority for NDIS applicants. Bell can also see clearly because the app's visuals have all been tested for colour blindness. Bell continues to the section of the app where she can fill out the NDIS access request form. She's given the option to apply for herself or for someone else. She chooses someone else, thinking that she will apply for her mother first. The app stops her though, saying that her mother is ineligible due to her age. However, she can access other supports through a link provided. Bell goes back and completes the 10 steps for herself. The easy read presentation of the app's content makes Bell feel comfortable and confident. Key emotional needs evident from our user interviews. Bell is then given next steps, including the option to email the completed applicant section of the access request form to herself or directly to her health professional, who will need to fill out the next section of the form. Our app also gives Bell a letter of instruction for her healthcare professional, which she needs to send directly to her, which she can send directly to her health professional at the end of the app. This letter of instruction is a key feature of our app's accessibility and risk management approach. It means that Bell's GP knows exactly how to help Bell apply for the NDIS. Bell has now started a full-time job thanks to disability support funded by the NDIS. Tianshu will now further explain the importance of the letter of instruction for healthcare professionals provided to Bell and other users of our app.
Thanks, Greta. Our research showed that a key accessibility barrier for many NDIS applicants is health professionals not understanding their role in the NDIS application process. We also find that language barriers between call applicants and health professionals further exacerbates this issue. Our app solves this issue by generating a letter of instruction designed for the user's health professional with targeted information about the role of healthcare professionals in NDIS applications, and the simple breakdown of each section of the NDIS access request form that needs to be completed by the healthcare professional. To create this letter of instruction, we analyze contemporary resources, including case law, statute, and international treaties. We then translated this legal analysis into an expert document that helps healthcare professionals to help our users and other NDIS applicants in applying for the NDIS. This means that the letter of instruction enhances the scope of our app beyond the individual users and provides a proactive approach to risk management. Next is Darcy, who will unpack the data behind the benefits of our app and to finish us up.
Thanks, Tianshu. We've decided to show you the data that backs up our app rather than tell you about the benefits ourselves. Through the principles of human-centered design, we've reduced the minimum number of words a user sees when completing the access request form by 82% from 5,000 words to just over 900. We've also reduced the minimum number of access request form pages the user has to interact with by 60% from 28 pages to 11. And we've also reduced the minimum reading comprehension level required to understand the questions on the access request form by 7 years, from 18 years old to 11 years young. We've input over 50 different assistive images into our app that allow people to ground the text in semantic context up from 0 in the paper-based access request form. We've also explained 30 key terms up from 0 in the access request form. This data supports our contention that the app has solved the accessibility issues with the access process of the NDIS. Now on to the future of NDIS Access Now. We aim to approach the NDIA directly to integrate our app within the scheme. We've decided to do this because the NDIA have stated that they are looking to outsource or create an online application process in-house. If the app is integrated, future versions of this app will include expert translations to ensure cultural appropriateness and accuracy. We would also design a customizable letter of instruction that reflects the needs of different disabilities. We hope this presentation demonstrated our attention to detail and research in building this app. We are now ready to field any questions.
Thank you for that presentation. Well done. Congratulations. And over to the judges.
I have a question. I was very interested in the fact that you've done the case statutory and human rights legislation analysis, and then presumably in some sort of rules and balancing system applied that as people move through the application process. What sort of database of prior decisions and rules did you create, and how did you balance those out in terms of arriving at, what was the correct information to seek at any one time?
Yeah, so thanks for that question, John. Essentially, the way we went about creating a letter of instruction and making sure the app followed the correct steps of the access request form was by drawing on previous experience and current experience of group members who are working in the disability advocacy sector. Some of that knowledge was useful, and then we also went further and really dug down into the cases and applicable legislation, delegated legislation, and big cases that have come out of the federal court in regards to NDIS access. And I think the key thing to note is that that kind of legal analysis isn't only present in the letter of instruction. It also informs the design of all the questions contained within the app the user must fill out. So that, I guess the tension there that you're talking about was trying to make those questions as accessible and easy to understand as possible, but retaining the same sort of legislative underpinnings.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say, when I was preparing for this and reading through the materials that Gary sent to us, I was a bit worried that you guys might have bitten off more than you could chew. It's a really big topic and felt really, really ambitious. But that was genuinely very impressive. Well done. I only have one question for you, really, which is around that letter, the letter of instruction to the GPs. You explained a lot about how you've gone about creating it. One thing I didn't hear, but you may have done it, given the attention to detail, did you test that with any GPs to make sure it was understandable from their perspective and that it would work for them as well? Because that would seem to be the part of the puzzle going forward, is simplifying it for your target user group, but also, also for those GPs as well.
I think for us, a lot of our research time was focused on the target user, given how different their perspective on the questions we were presenting were likely to be from our own. So we did do 3 separate interviews with users from our targeted user groups. And I suppose obviously the GP interview would be a great future improvement for us to be able to do. It is kind of just one of those things we've ran out of time for. Yep. And I guess the focus of our app was more facilitating the experience for the user. And that was more our focus than necessarily focusing on the degree of ease for the GP, even though obviously those two are interrelated. But I don't know if anyone else wants to add from our group to that.
Just that it is an area that we're aware we would like to test further. But yeah, as Jay said, it is something that we ran out of time with.
No, fair enough. It was a big challenge you took on. Thank you.
Yeah.
Look, that Alan has asked the exact same question I was going to ask, and I do think that letter of instruction for the healthcare professionals is a really key part of what you're doing and has a really clear educative effect, hopefully for the future. So, I would hope, and anticipate that that'd be something, you'd look into there. I can see this as being of enormous benefit and use by called support and community groups as a way of, empowering, community members, and obviously of great benefit to the NDIA itself in terms of increasing use and access to the scheme. Well done. This is absolutely, a critical area of need.
Yeah, I would encourage you all and Gary and the school generally to try and engage with the NDIA. The NDIS is a great legacy of the great Melburnian, Brian Howe MP, who happens to be the father of John Howe at the School of Government there at Melbourne Uni. And accessibility to NDIS, I think, is its biggest issue. And if you can really help with that and accelerate NDIA's mission in that respect, would be fantastic. Be a great thing for the standing school on law and technology that you have there at Melbourne Uni to engage with, I think.
And look, if I can just say, following on from John's comments there, Ben, I know that you were in the NDIS clinic last semester, and obviously you've continued the interest. So, I think absolutely, as John said, there's a lot of scope to to build and focus on this area.
Yeah, for sure, Kate. I think that's a really important part of the app. It's kind of like a continuation of the public interest clinics that as students, we've been able to be a part of. So I've definitely brought that legacy in. I just wanted to clarify something about the letter of instruction that I think that we forgot to mention. I think perhaps the answers to the questions that were posed give maybe an implied picture that perhaps we didn't think about the GP's perspective at all with the letter of instruction, but we did try as much as possible to try and make it presentable for them. I know that it's 18 pages long, full of analysis of law and stuff, but when compared to the many cases and 700 provisions of the NDIS Act that we've distilled, I think that's a great improvement. And I think if we were able to, under the course directions, go out and approach organisations ourselves, which we currently weren't allowed to do, I think we'd want to trial that with Cal community doctors for sure.
And I'll just quickly add something. If in a way we made it more accessible for GPs and more understandable to GPs, because there's an option for the user to send it directly to their GP. Because in COVID, you don't know who has a printer. Send it directly to the GP, and we've made it so that the variables have it uses the applicant's name, so it's very personable. It says this person has applied for NDIS. This is what you need to do to help this person, and these are the steps you need to go through. Here is the form. We've told them what they need to do when they come see you at the next appointment. So it is quite personable in that way.
All right, well, thank you very much. Congratulations, team. And that takes us to the end of the presentations and the start of the judges' deliberations. I just want to say before the judges go out to deliberate how amazing and how impressed I am and how lucky I am to be your teacher, to see the presentations, to see the work you've put into, the thought that you've put into both the presentations, but also the problems that needed to be resolved. And we can all see, whilst the government may, in many of these applications deal with government services, whilst there may be services that are there, you can see quite clearly how not user-friendly they are. So congratulations to everyone. I'm glad I'm not being a judge today, because I think it'll be a difficult decision. Now, thank you, students. I am going to hand it over to Alan Peckham on behalf of Herbert Smith Freehills to announce the Herbert Smith Freehills Best Law Apps Award. After he's spoken and said any words he wants to say, I'll announce the Audience Choice Award.
Thank you, Gary, and congratulations, everybody. I'm really proud to be here today on behalf of the firm to present the Herbert Smith Freehills Award for the Best All-Round Law App for Semester 2 2021. We've been long-term supporters of this course because we believe that the lawyers the future needs are lawyers who are not just technically excellent, but they're able to develop and design solutions that actually meet the needs of our clients. And Gary, Melbourne Law School as a whole, and Pip have really led the charge in this regard from a tertiary education perspective. So we're really pleased to support this course and very grateful for all of you getting into it and participating in the way that you have, but also really very much looking forward to you all becoming the lawyers the future needs. I think this is the 5th time I've been on the judging panel, and I really have to say this is the most impressive group of apps that we've had to deal with so far as judges. It is a challenge on the judging panel, I have to say. And before you ask, yes, I do say that to every class. The quality of the apps really does just keep getting better and better every semester, which is a reflection as well of the evolution of the technology and all the work that John's team do too. And but really, it's very, very impressive to see what you are able to do and what you've all been able to produce. So very well done to all of you. However, not everyone can be a winner. That's life, I guess. Kate, John and I have assessed each app against the 5 criteria that we were asked to consider them against. So usefulness, completeness, the design, your ambition and creativity, and also your presentation itself. And without further ado, the winners, because we couldn't split 2 of them, of the Herbert Smith Freehills Award for Best Law App for this semester are Spent Convictions and NDIS Access. Very well done to all of you. It's really very impressive what you've been able to deliver, so congratulations.
Congratulations, everyone. Well done. I'm glad I wasn't in the position of the judges. Thank you, Alan, for your words. Congratulations, students. Now there's an audience award as well. The audience award was also a dead heat. So it's been a dead heat morning this morning. It was a dead heat between WeCare and NDIS. So congratulations on your winning the audience award, both of those teams. Thank you so much. For the teams that won the HSF awards, the two teams, we're going to ask you to hang around for some interviews in a moment. But I want to just thank everybody for your participation. It'll be really very sad to see you go. I'm sure that most of the students that are leaving will not be sad to go. They will be rapt that they are about to finish and can go out into the real world. But I do want to say that the applications were incredible standard, working under really hard conditions. It was just wonderful to see how much work you put in and how it was actually delivered, both in your presentations, but the care that you put into your designs, the thoughtfulness and so on. And I suppose it's a bit sad that there was that opportunity, but so many government services and so many services for the community, in fact, are so difficult to use. So thank you so much. Thank you for audience for watching. I really appreciate it. Thank you for my assistants, JD and Christine as well. For the judges, Alan, John and Kate, thank you as well.